All right. It's 2:04, almost 2:05. I'm going to say let's get this meeting started. So welcome everyone to our TAC meeting for Sherwood West. I know that we haven't met in a little while, but I'm going to go over some of the information that we've looked at over the past couple months and where we're at in the project here in just a little bit. But since we haven't met, I think we're just going to go around and I'll just have everybody introduce themselves. I'm Erica Palmer, planning manager for the city, and I'm just going to start with the consulting team first. So Joe, would you like to go?
Hi, Joe Dills, MIG, consultant team project manager.
Kate?
Hi, Kate Rogers. I'm a senior planner with MIG EPG and helping Joe on the project.
Carl?
I'm Carl Springer with DKS. I'm the transportation lead on the project.
And Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Salhas. I'm with Leland Consulting Group, and I'm the economic and market analysis lead.
And Joy?
Joy Chang, City of Sherwood, senior planner.
Great. And then how about Chris Faulkner?
Hi, Chris Faulkner, I'm a planner at Clean Water Services.
Glenn?
Hey there, Glenn Boland. I'm a planner with Region 1 ODOT, and I have to leave at 3, so I have a colleague of mine coming in. He's one of my engineers. I think that should be right about the time we get to Carl's report. So I was going to have him look at that anyway, so it's a decent transition. His name is John Russell.
Great, thank you. Jessica?
Hey everybody, Jessica Pells. I'm a senior transportation planner at Washington County.
And Matt Craigie?
Good afternoon, everyone. Matt Craigie, Washington County Economic Development.
And Preston?
Yeah, Preston Korst. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at the Home Building Association of Greater Portland.
And Tim?
Hi, Tim O'Brien, planner at Metro.
Great. And I think that Bruce.
Hi, Bruce Coleman, Economic Development Manager with the City of Sherwood.
Great. And I think that's everyone for now. We might get a couple more participants hopping on here.
Erica, could you identify who's on the phone?
Yes, I was going to get to that actually. So we have a couple people providing public testimony this afternoon. We have Brian Fields, Marianne Highland, Jeff Kleinman, and Chris Clemau. And I don't know if they're all on the phone, but when we get to public comment, I'll call on it.
Thanks.
Thanks. Well, moving on to public comment. So we had a couple people sign up in advance, and I'm going to start with Brian Fields.
Hello. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Members of the TAC, I appreciate your time. My name is Brian Fields, and I'm submitting these comments on behalf of the Eastview Road Neighborhood Association. Our association is opposed to the proposed north-south truck bypass on the western edge of Sherwood West urban growth boundary. Specifically today, I'm commenting on the feasibility rationale submitted in the November 4th, 2022 memo from Bob Galati to Erica Palmer, which was included in the November 17th, 2022 TAC meeting packet. I just would like to say it's been many months, almost a year, that we've become aware of the plans to route a bypass past our homes. And in that time, we haven't received anything specific about the proposal other than this line on the map. This memo really constitutes the first time any specific plans have been proposed to us. And so with that, I would like to begin comments on this. First of all, in this memo leading up to the actual design elements, Mr. Galati minimizes the impact. He characterizes this bridge and fill scheme impacting the fewest number of structures. Nothing could really be further from the truth. I would like to discuss some of the actual implications. The proposal to add enough fill over the course of Eastview Road to change a 12% slope to a 7.5% slope would have a devastating impact on our neighborhood. The volume of fill necessary to accomplish this is extraordinary. The volume would be 76,000 cubic yards or 7,600 dump truck loads. This would be 21 dump trucks a day for a year to deliver this volume of fill. The project would involve construction of a new 450-foot long bridge over Chicken Creek. The project will require a 150-foot right-of-way to accommodate 3 lanes of traffic, 2 sidewalks, 2 guardrails, fill slope, and 2 fences at the toe of both fills. The impact of the bridge, road elevation described, and the necessary right-of-way would wipe out 9 houses. Several of the homes on Eastview Road are less than 150 feet from the western side of the right-of-way. Due to the width of the right-of-way, for this volume of fill, 5 homes would be in the direct path of the right-of-way. 2 additional homes would have their access cut off and have a 3-lane truck route on their doorsteps and 40 feet above them. 1 home would be removed to improve the dangerous Eastview intersection. 1 home, which is on the west side of Eastview Road in the rural reserve, would be removed by bridge construction. In addition, raising the elevation of Eastview Road would eliminate access to 4 homes in the rural reserve on the west side of Eastview Road. The memo really minimizes the advantages of choosing Elwert, and it exaggerates any disadvantages. Mr. Galati does not acknowledge that for almost all of the run of Elwert Road between Highway 99 and Sherwood Road, there's vacant land on either the west or east side of the road. That would allow road expansion without impacting homes.
Brian, I'm sorry, I hate to cut you off, but you have about 30 more seconds.
Okay. And he does not address that the neighborhoods built on the east side of Elwert Road were built during the current traffic patterns on Elwert Road as a bypass between Highway 99 and Sherwood Road. This is not new. The homeowners in these neighborhoods bought their homes under the current traffic flow of Elwert Road, and the current physical limitations would require much smaller engineering projects to remedy traffic flow and its impact than this fantastical scheme proposed by Mr. Galati. And I would just like to conclude by saying that the statements in the memo, the text, is not a good faith effort to advocate a public policy position. It totally ignores the existence of our neighborhood. In fact, it has even removed visual representation of all of the structures of our houses on Eastview Road and Edie Road, while representing all of the structures on Elwert Road. It also makes no mention of the fact that there's an existing neighborhood. And I will leave it there since I'm out of time, and thank you for your time.
Is Mary Ann on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes. So Mary Ann, you have a little, just like between 3 and 4 minutes, because Brian went a little bit over.
Thank you, Erica. Hello, members of the TAC and also city officials. Thank you for the opportunity to present. Following me, you will hear from the Eastview Road and Neighborhood Association's legal counsel and a traffic engineer that we've retained to help us navigate through this plan that the city has proposed. I'm the president of the Eastview Road Neighborhood Association, and I will piggyback on some of the remarks that Brian made, who is also a member of the association. So first and foremost, what I want to say is that we're basing these remarks on the expert advice of a retired civil engineer with whom we consulted, who reviewed Mr. Galati's plan. So I want you to know that it comes from engineering expertise. I want to comment about the survey remarks from the last survey that you sent out. And in your meeting materials, you will see that survey summarized. I encourage all of you to go to the bottom of that survey and actually look at the comments, read all of the comments, because what you will see is that overwhelmingly, the people who commented, and there were about 90, were overwhelmingly opposed to the bypass that now the city is proposing over Highway 99 from Brookman to connect up to this Eastview Road bypass. People were overwhelmingly opposed to the Eastview Road bypass, and they were overwhelmingly opposed to the Elwood realignment. One of the reasons of the opposition to the Elwood Road realignment is because it essentially cuts off east-west access from people who live in our part of the proposed new community and Highway 99 and vice versa. So the proposed realignment cuts off our direct access. So think about the impact for us and people in the rural reserve who need to go from farm to market and what that will mean. There's been absolutely no consideration for our needs for east-west access. In regard to Mr. Galati's proposal, which, frankly is really quite shocking. And, Brian really went through a lot of the details. I will emphasize a couple that I think are important for you to consider. So number one, so Mr. Galati said that the main reason for this route, this bypass, is to get trucks off of Eastview Road. He said this will impact the fewest number of structures, which Brian has demonstrated to you is patently false. He says
you
that,
have about 30 seconds left. Sorry.
Okay, so no problem. He says that by this design, that it will get traffic off of the improved Elwood Road realignment. Well, that's a falsehood because virtually every single truck that would use this path would either come from or go to the realigned Elwood as they're traveling north to south. And so I just, what we're wanting is this line to be taken off the map. And it's time for this fiction to stop. And it's time for the deception to stop. And it's time for the city to be honest with the residents of Sherwood that this plan is not viable and that the only viable option for a north-south traffic flow is Elwood. We have not seen one proposal from the city to examine what that would look like. They have refused to even look at it.
Okay,
so I ask you TAC members to please encourage and ask the city to be accountable for that option. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a Jeffrey Kleinman on the line? I don't hear a Jeffrey. Jeff? How about a Chris Clemo?
This is Chris. Can you hear me?
I can. Do you want to state your name and address into the record?
Yes, my name is Chris Clemo, and my business address is 2237 Northwest Torrey Pines Drive in Bend, Oregon, 97703. I am a transportation engineer who has been hired by the Eastview Group, and the biggest concern that I've got, at least in the materials that we have seen so far, is the justification for improving Eastview Road versus, another roadway, because none of the documents that the city has prepared to date kind of substantiate the need to improve that road, nor does it show how the road is going to connect on either end within the planning period. I mean, there's no documentation for any of that. And so we're, Elwood versus Eastview. And in looking at this, I mean, it appears that both of the agencies' TSPs, meaning the counties and the cities, both point towards Elwood being the arterial roadway that's going to be improved to, it's listed on the TSP as a 2 to 3 lane arterial, but I'm anticipating it's going to be improved to 3 lanes. And Mr. Galati's letter indicated that there is this concern over increased truck traffic on that roadway. And I'm curious as to where this cut-through truck traffic is originating, its origin or its destination, because it's not coming from that neighborhood in particular. I mean, unless this is on a farm-to-market type of road where these trucks are already on that road. So the question we've got then is, if that truly is the concern, how are these trucks going to access Eastview and use it as a bypass? I mean, we would question that it's even reasonable to do that or even appropriate. So I guess until we can see some more transportation related materials, which I understand DKS is going to be presenting here, I'm going to have to limit my comments to that and see where this goes. Thanks.
Great. I'm just going to ask one more time. Is there a Jeffrey Kleinman on the line here for public comment? And I don't see his number, so I think we're just going to move on to item number 3.
I think that's us. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. We got some, oops, ooh, scroll wheel. Sorry about that. We had our agenda. We had a pretty full agenda today. I have a lot to go over. So we're going to get right to it. But I think before we get into kind of, summarizing the open house and some of the other work that we've been doing.
Hi, this is Jeff Kleinman. Can I butt in? I'm sorry, I had trouble connecting.
Yes, Jeff.
You're on my phone. I mean, did you call the wrong number?
I dialed 1-253-215-8782. Could you tell them I'm trying to dial in, and let's both hang up, okay?
Okay.
Jeff, I think you're still on the line. Oh, it looks like they hung up. So let's just give them just 1 minute here.
While we're waiting on that, Kate, suggestion earlier was to give a briefing on what the alternatives are since it's been a while. Would you like me to do that and then you guys can head on?
Yeah, that sounds good,
Okay.
Joe.
That's great.
Okay. So Erica, we're hearing somebody in the distant background talking.
That might be coming from my end, Joe.
Oh, okay.
There's someone in the conference room behind me that.
Hi, this is Jeff Kleinman. Whenever you're ready.
All right, Jeff. So if you could just state your name and address into the record for us, and then you'll have 3 minutes for testimony.
Yeah, I'm going to have to take down. There we go. Okay, I don't think you'll have any feedback now. So my name is Jeff Kleinman, Kleinman. My address is 1207 Southwest 6th Avenue, Portland, 97204. I am an attorney and I represent the Eastview Road Neighborhood Association. And I just wanted to supplement some of the comments very briefly that my clients have made and that Mr. Clement has made. Basically, as I understand, explanations that have been given of mapping this connection over Eastview, it's that there really is nothing to worry about because it's just a line on a map. So what? Even if it never gets built, which, by the way, is my understanding that it never will get built. There's no place for traffic to go in a generally northerly direction. It's you get into a winding rural street pattern in the rural reserve where no highway improvements will be allowed. But the problem with putting a fictitious line on a map is that it greatly affects my clients' properties and especially the value of their properties because a very large portion of their properties would have to be taken for this project when it occurs. And also the grade is likely to be quite different from the grade of the home. So in effect, placing the line on the map would basically give rise to an inverse condemnation and an entitlement to compensation, probably for the whole value of the properties as far as I'm concerned. That's the reason that my clients have engaged me and engaged Chris, and will probably engage others at this point, because a line on the map, when you do the cost-benefit analysis, there is a tremendous cost to citizen taxpayers, and there ultimately is almost certainly no benefit to the city of Sherwood and its planning efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep.
All right, so we're back to item number 3, and I think Joe's going to touch on the 3 alternative maps.
Okay, so trying to pick up from where you all were last involved in the spring, in late spring, we were really going through a number of discussions with both you and the CAC about what is the land use categories, essentially the land use legend to use, and what would be the assumptions for housing densities and so on. We then did some individual work with the CAC on that, and which ultimately led to a chip exercise. And it resulted in the land use categories that are shown on the right here. So sort of starting with the residential end of the spectrum, that series of discussions led to wanting to look at multifamily, middle housing, cottage cluster, as if they were zones. Of course, they're concept plan designations at this point, but think of them as zones. And then 3 categories of residential dwellings that would be the combination of single family, and the array of middle housing. So that was the starting point. And then I think the non-residential designations are also pretty straightforward. So I'll just talk about those as I talk about the maps. We created a chip game that the CAC did in June, and they created the first draft of the maps that then were refined over the summer and ended up in your packet today. So from north to south, what we're looking at is one of the concepts that was discussed early on, a very kind of broad area of mixed employment. The exercise resulted in the southern end of that area. And if you can use your cursor, Kate, it might be helpful. North of Chicken Creek, but still in the North District, being an array of different residential designations. The stars here are neighborhood parks, which have always been part of the program. Hard to see, but there are trails on the maps, and these are very complete maps in terms of land use and transportation integration. This particular alternative 1 designated the community park in 2 places. One is north of Edie Road, and the other is in the area just south of Chicken Creek. Those are the larger green areas. What is called the far west here basically had the low density neighborhood designation throughout most of it, but with a little bit of cottage cluster. And then looking to the central part of the map, where it is what we call the West District, primarily mostly medium density neighborhood, lower densities in the hilltop, which has been looked at since the beginning of Sherwood West planning. And then some kind of pocketed areas of multifamily and middle housing throughout that portion of the area. When you get to the south end of the project, it is much more mixed, with a theme that it rose up out of this exercise, which is the use of the Kruger Road area. And I don't know if you guys are seeing a cursor move. I'm not. But south of the high school, that's Kruger Road. And this map shows a mix of employment and multifamily and some mixed use in that area. The general theme being that Kruger Road had the potential to be a bit of a destination within Sherwood West, and certainly something that serves the neighborhoods to the north and south of it. Finally, the southern end of the project, very southern end at Chapman Road, has a designation I haven't talked about yet, and it's labeled as hospitality zone. There it is. There's the cursor. So the hospitality zone is envisioned as a place for this idea of welcome to the wine country. There may be a destination use of some sort, wine sales, vineyard kind of thing. If you're familiar with the Allison, this might be Sherwood West's version of the Allison as a wine destination that's in Yamhill County. And then there's another spot at the north end of Kruger Road. So apologies for the quick summary, but you can see that the exercise really generated quite an array of land use display across the map, keeping this theme of adding jobs to Sherwood in Sherwood West, and a strong assertive move towards that, principally through the mixed employment designation, but a variety of housing types. We'll get to the metrics in a moment, but all of these landed somewhere close to about 10 units an acre averaged out. We go to alternative 2. I won't go through in as much detail, but alternative 2 is different in that the north area has less of the mixed employment and more of the array of residential choices, and a little mixed use node that it would be serving that area along Elwert Road in that vicinity. The far west area has still at the Eastview Road end of it, the lowest density designation, capturing the hilltop kind of environment, but then to the medium density designation in the lower flatter areas. And think of that as infill too. The assumption is that the existing homes in that area would be retained over time. Any of the new development in this area is looking more at the buildable lands between existing homes and not assuming that there's redevelopment, although which of course may occur over time. In the West District area around the high school, the land uses get a little bit mixed, more mixed. This is where we see the first introduction of mixed use on both the north and south side of Kruger Road, and also some of the residential uses that are on either side of it as well. I should point out the community park. I think all 3 of the maps ended up with the community park in that vicinity where the cursor is now. This particular one located the second community park in the Southwest District where the cursor is showing. This group chose to make the hospitality zone quite a bit larger and basically extend it from Highway 99 up to the top of the hill along Chapman. And what else to say about that? I think that's it. Again, if you look through the colors here, the conceptual local street network and trails and neighborhood parks are all part of the alternative packages. Third map, I'll mention something that is sort of an assumption within these. The research in the project to date has identified the need over time for 1 elementary school and 1 middle school, but they won't be needed until further out in the life of Sherwood West. The school district's phrasing of it was a minimum of 10 years out from the beginning of development of Sherwood West, and it could be longer. So we have not been specific about where they would be. They would simply be allowed within various land use designations and occur when they do. Okay, alternative 3 at the north end, lots of mixed employment, kind of a similar pattern really to alternative 1, except a community park is in part of the North District. A little bit more residential assumed for the far west area. In the west, this group down on wrapping around the high school really utilize those lands to the north and immediately west and along Kruger for more of the mixed use and multifamily kinds of designations. And then finally in the south, what's different here primarily is the hospitality zone is close to Kruger. And then the area along 99 down to Chapman is mixed employment. So that's your 5-minute overview of 3 alternatives. I hope I didn't go too fast. I think you get the theme of these. Maybe we'll go on. I'm mindful of the time here. I think we ought to go on to the open house results, but we'll create an opportunity for questions about the alternatives a little bit later in the agenda. So let's go to Erica and Kate on the open house results. And if you guys could really just capture the sort of the 5-minute version of these.
Yep, sure. So after we landed on our 3 alternatives with the CAC, we held an open house last October. It was a pretty robust open house. We did a lot of outreach within the community. We had between 80 to 90 attendees, 60 people actually signed in. We had informational posters around the auditorium and at the Ridges School. So we went over kind of the design concepts for the alternatives and kind of the themes of the concept plan that touched on, housing, parks and trails and open space, and also the transportation options. We also had an activity for everyone at the open house to kind of rank their alternatives as well. And we had a printed questionnaire for folks to fill out. In the same line, we had a virtual open house as well. And on that virtual open house, we asked some questions about the alternatives. What do you like? What do you not like? What would you change? And then on the online open house, we also had folks kind of rank their preferences for options. So I think, Kate, we can go to the next slide, unless, Kate, you have anything you would like to say.
No, nothing else to add to that.
Okay. So moving on to kind of what we saw on the online survey results here. The preference for the 3 alternatives in the North District was alternative number 1. Just want to keep going here. And then the preference for in the Far West District for the 3 alternatives was also alternative number 1. Moving on to the West District, the preferred alternative out of the 3 alternatives in this scenario was alternative 2. And then once again, I'm looking at the Southeast District, the preferred alternative out of the 3 was also alternative number 2.
And I would say that some of these were kind of more strongly stated preferences than others. I mean, I think in this case, alternative 2 was a pretty clear, by far it had the most kind of number 1 rankings. But some of the other ones were a little bit closer. So, and that's something that we will factor in the CAC will also factor into their recommendations for which alternative or which kind of blend of alternatives to move forward with. And we also asked, as part of the online survey and at the open house, about some of the key transportation concepts that are part of the plan. So this north-south connector and the L-word realignment proposal and the overpass between the Brookman area and Sherwood West. And we didn't have kind of a yes, no, we support it or don't support it kind of question. We just had an open-ended question about each of those and got kind of a range of responses. And so all of those comments, if you want to kind of dig into the details, they are all included in your packet. But yeah, I think I was posted at the transportation station and I did hear a lot of questions, particularly about the L-word realignment and what the benefit was, what the purpose was. And that was something that has been, was identified in the preliminary concept plan and is carried forward, and the CAC has continue to express support for it, but we're going to kind of check in with them tonight to see if they still support that idea, in addition to the north-south connector. Joe, anything else from you to add?
No, I think let's keep going so we can get to some more topics and then some time for discussion.
So this is Chris.
Chris, take us away on the
Yeah,
development.
I will take it away. So we held a developer tour. You can go to the next slide. I can't even remember which day. It was October 24th. It was a rainy, wet day, and Erica was our fearless chauffeur. We had about 4 developers and brokers that we invited to tour the study area, and we stopped at a couple locations up in the proposed industrial area at Shoals and Roy Rogers, and then we stopped down by the high school off Kruger Road to have a little more focused conversations about the concepts and the market. And the purpose was really to be a reality check from those who are in the business of building communities. We wanted to get some input about these draft ideas. See if there were any fatal flaws, if there were any issues around implementation or areas that we should focus on in the plan. And so it was a pretty good conversation. And then after the tour, we stopped back at City Hall and had a little bit more of a debrief. And so the next couple slides, I'm just going to hit some of the highlights of the feedback that we got from the developers. Since that first stop was at the industrial area on the north end, some of the big ideas or the takeaways were, one, the industrial developers like Sherwood's EI zone. They say is, compared to other industrial zones around the region, it's a really good and flexible one. We talked a little bit about the types of industrial uses that we could expect in that part of Sherwood, and they said, given the distance to I-5 and that it's not on 99W, you're not going to get large distribution type uses that we're seeing in other parts of the region, but that there is just almost not limitless, but there's definitely unmet demand right now for just flex industrial that would be multi-tenant buildings that would appeal to a pretty diverse range of business types. So everything from contractors to small manufacturers to maybe small distribution, but really the developers would build spec buildings and then lease them out to businesses in the area. And they did speak highly of the connection to some of the residential growth to the north, that would make, further solidify this area as a viable industrial area. As far as timing, they also said that the region is, from a market point of view, is essentially out of industrial land. So as soon as this land would be able to be entitled and served by utilities and services, it would get built out as quickly as possible. We also talked a little bit, based on a question I asked, about does any retail work up there or need up there, kind of to be supportive retail for all the jobs that are going to be there. And the main kind of policy feedback we got was that some of the regulations around supportive retail within the industrial zones can be problematic in terms of how developers or would be able to size the retail center to be feasible, and working within some of the restrictions around having a direct connection between the retail and the industry on the site. From there, we drove through the district down to down below the high school, and we had a conversation around the hospitality zone. Since that's the part of the area that that is envisioned for. Part of our developer tour was Graymore Development. So many of you are probably familiar with them. They do a lot of retail and mixed use development. They're doing much of the Vancouver waterfront, if you've been there. And some of the feedback we got about the hospitality zone was it really needs a destination, so kind of an anchor use. If it's going to be wine themed, ideally it's an authentic working winery. If there was one there, that would be an easy thing to build off of. Although they caveated that by saying that off-site tasting rooms are becoming quite popular and are successful in a lot of places, and so that would also be potentially part of the mix. And then in terms of density and feasibility of parking, they thought that structured parking would be unlikely in this part of the city. You can go on to the next slide. The remaining topics that we talked about, this is more at the debrief when we got back to City Hall, was we talked a little bit about infrastructure and implementation. So in terms of infrastructure, the roads are the essential piece of infrastructure to serve development, and that sort of planting that in the ground and having certainty around the timing and the construction of the road network is essential to getting the developers to respond. They thought that getting a wetlands inventory would be really important as soon as possible to identify and start addressing any barriers there. And then they also mentioned that on the south end, I was not aware, but apparently the high school is not currently served by sewer, but that's coming soon. And as soon as that happens, that sort of sub area of the study area will be immediately, serviceable and get attention from developers. Infrastructure funding is going to be critical, of course, as it always is in any growth area, especially probably with terrain and likely higher costs, as we've been seeing with inflation. And so the developers, expressed their concern about the requirements for developers to front load infrastructure and the incentives around ways to through public-private partnerships or urban renewal or reimbursement districts, ways to help ease that burden on the front end. And it just spoke to the need that immediately following this planning process, it would be really important to have a more thorough infrastructure funding strategy, again, to provide that certainty. They also thought that public facilities could really be a catalyst for development. So if there was the need for a community center, a school, a police station, a fire station, things like that, that can help jumpstart a development. And then finally, I asked a question about, the attractiveness of Sherwood as a community, as a destination for jobs, and it really does have a good reputation in the development world. It's known for its good schools and its quality of life, and that's again going to bode well for attracting jobs over the long term. And just to conclude, I would say that I think the most important part, especially as the kind of the economist and market person, is the positivity that the developers had to the industrial land and the employment land up on the north, that it's, distance from I-5 and distance from 99W is not really a constraint to attracting jobs there. And it was good to get that confirmation. And that was it.
Thanks, Chris. Let's cover one more topic and then we'll pause for feedback. And I think our next slides are about the qualitative that we did. Is that right, Kate?
Yeah, we have these, we can skip past these alternatives. We already talked about these.
Yeah.
We have a little bit on the metrics.
Couple of points on the metrics. On the housing side of things, the capacity within the three alternatives range from alternative 3 at 3,639 dwellings to a high and alternative 2 of 3,845. So really across the three, pretty similar kinds of total numbers. And the real difference makers in the colors that are on the map, for alternative 2, it had the most multifamily. It also had the most of the cottage zone, high level of interest in cottage housing by the Citizen Advisory Committee, at least in terms of middle housing implementation. And then we noted here also that the alternative 1 had the highest number of our medium high density designation. One thing to note about multifamily is that it only takes a little bit of ground to generate a lot of units. So the difference in acreage between the three alternatives actually isn't physically very much, but because the density is higher, that's why you have such a range from 585 on one plan to 1,000 units, over 1,000 units on another. The next slide here, total jobs, sort of the bottom row. We're also in the 4,300 to 5,000 range. The differences are shown in yellow here. It really comes down to how much total land area you have of any of the individual designations on the map. And they all did it in a little bit different way. Alternative 3 adds up to the most jobs because it has the greatest mix of uses, and it has the largest number of jobs in categories other than the mixed employment, which is the top line. Okay, so let's keep going a little bit further. You saw your materials in the packet here, where we did this sort of consumer reports kind of rating. This is very much a qualitative comparison of the alternatives using the project goals. So Kate, I'll cover the first 3 and then you can pick up on the second 3.
Okay.
The first goal has to do with the area being designated as what the CAC called a natural extension of Sherwood. And it's integrated and sort of preserves the community's heritage and small town feel. Alternative 1 really did the best job of that in its largest amount of lower density uses, although in the context of having quite a bit of the different categories. The second goal here, the second line item in this table, has to do with business and employment opportunities. And really all 3 of the alternatives do an excellent job of adding employment base to the city. They just simply do it in different ways. So alternative 1, I mentioned, has the most purple on the map. It would have most of that flex space that Chris was talking about. But alternative 3 is where there's quite a number of different commercial and mixed use designations added into the mix. So it sort of depends a little bit on what you want out of life for which of these would rate highest, but we rated them the same, all high, because they would all result at build out in quite a significant add to the city's employment base and local job opportunities. Transportation we'll get to in a minute, but why don't you pick us up, Kate, on number 4?
Sure. So number 4 is about access to a variety of parks and natural areas anchored by the Chicken Creek Greenway. And so really all 3 of the alternatives strongly support this, and maybe it should all be, solid circles there. But really the main difference is that alternative 2 just had more park acreage because they designated, larger areas to their community parks and maybe sort of medium-sized neighborhood parks. But really, they all feature the same kind of trail network and natural resource protection, and the Chicken Creek Greenway is kind of a major feature within Sherwood West. And then number 5 is about active transportation. And so that one really, there's really no difference in terms of how, the trail system and, sidewalks and road system is consistent across the 3 alternatives. So there wasn't kind of much to compare them based on, but again, they really all support that goal very, very strongly. And then the last one is about pragmatic implementation and well-planned implementation. And again, I think these are pretty similar. I think the only thing that maybe put alternative 2 into the, somewhat supports category is that alternative 2 had a very large area of the hospitality zoning. And that's just kind of an untested concept in Sherwood or really anywhere as far as we are aware of. And so it's maybe just a little bit more risky to designate kind of a large area of Sherwood West as hospitality, given that.
Okay. Let's pause here. Thank you for hanging with us through 3 agenda items here of briefing. Why don't you roll back to the maps if you could, Kate?
Sure.
And let's open it up to comments or questions from the TAC members on any of the topics we've covered so far. So the community feedback, the developer tour, or what's on the maps themselves. Bruce?
Just have a question. So is there any sense in terms of what kind of jobs get created in these different employment zones? And, obviously my impression is that we're trying to attract, a mix of jobs, but that are, that can help serve the economic needs of the community too. And I'm just wondering if there's any sense of looking at that, because you have different kinds of employment being shown.
Chris, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little hard. It's a little hard not to be vague because it could be a lot of different kinds of employment. Those kind of multi-tenant flex parks, it could be a small wholesaler next door to a small manufacturer next door to a electrical contractor, something like that. In some of the work we did in the initial market analysis last year, we did, and I think this, and I think you were part of some of those meetings, is that we have been hearing that there's a growing interest in this area for some of the more technology-based businesses that might be getting crowded out or priced out of the Hillsborough market. And I think if I recall some of the comments during the developer tour, there were some examples of that happening now. Yeah, so I mean, that would be my main sense is that it's not gonna be so much a monoculture of business types that are going to gravitate here. It's going to be a collection of smaller tenants.
I guess the second part of the question is we have some areas in different plans. We have more hospitality versus less hospitality. We might have more mixed use, not mixed employment in some areas. And in some cases, we have more or less mixed employment. So is there a sense in terms of what kinds of jobs get created in these different, I don't mean just in that northern portion, but in the different employment districts, if you would? Maybe that's too vague a question at this stage.
I'll add a little bit to that, Bruce. I think the way to look at it is the potential for job type. The mixed employment likely has the highest potential for manager level jobs and highly technically trained kinds of jobs, with the support kind of employees as well. The rest of the employment types, commercial, mixed use, and hospitality zone, probably have higher potential for service related jobs. And the other way to kind of look at these is that I think mixed employment also has the highest potential for what I'll call leveraged jobs. So if you've got an employer there who is one type of high-tech manufacturer, well, they may have a relationship with a software firm that is just down the road in the same district, and more relationships like that. Hope that's helpful. Glenn, let's go to your question or comment.
Hey, thanks, Joe. For those who don't remember, Glenn Boland, I'm a region planner with ODOT. As you know, with topography, connectivity is your big challenge for this one from transportation standpoint. No surprise there. So I think it is notable that what I see on a pattern here, it does match with the regional transportation functional plan that calls for 1 mile arterial spacing, either minor or major, half-mile collector spacing. I think I measured around 1.25 miles or so between Roy Rogers and Elbert and Eastview, something like that. So I think this does a nice job of that. I know folks had discussion about that in the public comment, but that is important for overall connectivity to provide travel choices for people. That's my main comment right there. I think my recollection, a couple more points, is from thinking back to the city's EOA, employment opportunities analysis. I recall there wasn't a lot of need for the retail, but there was for the kind of things you're talking about in this mixed employment. So I think you're doing a nice job here of capturing some opportunities for the city with that. It's also, for those of us who's worked with cities for a long time, in Oregon, that's your best tax base too. So that's going to be very helpful in building this expensive infrastructure of crossing streams and all that. And I would mention, we're starting to see multi-story, even industrial stuff now in Hillsborough as land prices have gone up, and mobility is probably part of that too. But think about that as you're, getting down to the finer levels. I think of this, that could mean some even finer grained connectivity within those employment areas. It does allow you to have some of that local services, things like that those folks are going to need. I think I'm not an expert on the hospitality thing, but I know that downtowns are often the spot that people look to first. If I think of Walla Walla, McMinnville, Carlton, for the remote wine tasting, where you can have a cluster next to restaurants and things like that. So it could be done, I'm sure. I just thought I'd just mention that for my own wine tasting experiences. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else on the topics we've talked about so far? Tim, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Joe. And just clarification for the housing densities and numbers, you're kind of assuming that 10% is, well, you have 0, 10, 20, and 50, in the charts. Is the 10 you're thinking your best get? I mean, maybe putting you on the spot, not fair, but because we all don't know about this, but that's the best spot going forward, you're thinking? Or
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. For others, what Tim is asking about is the housing capacity of Sherwood West. The CAC was very interested in the what if question. What if the lower density zones that allow single family were to see a lot of middle housing that came into them? And so we modeled it at 10% of it is a middle housing kind of scenario versus 20 versus 30 versus 50. I forget the array, but from then on up. So for the purposes of these estimates, we chose the 10% bump for middle housing in those 3 zones, based mostly on the interest by the city and trying to evaluate a reasonable worst case for traffic. But in asking this question of about 15 people now throughout the process, nobody really knows how much middle housing might come in. The developer end of the spectrum and home builders' advice was there's a growing interest, but maybe it's more, in the 5% kind of component. And topography makes a big difference. So where it's flatter, it's more feasible. And where it's steeper, it's less feasible. Preston, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's the story of how we reasoned just a middle housing component other than the specific middle housing zones that we have on the map.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I think I would agree with that still. I know certain jurisdictions, as they plan for it, are looking at a range and they're trying to hit that percentage. It's difficult, especially as the law is still pretty fresh on that, and builders haven't necessarily figured out all the logistical challenges and some of the more beneficial opportunities around middle housing. So yeah, I think you're right on that. I would say that infrastructure is a big component of this that we should be thinking about, where and how the infrastructure comes on those more dense developments should be considered. But I do appreciate the input that's been taken already from our industry and from developers on our end.
If it's okay with everybody, unless there's another key question, I want to get to transportation and then we'll do our little interactive exercise. Let's roll up to Carl's slides, and Carl, tell us about the analysis you did.
Very good. Thanks, Joe. So this slide just kind of walks you through the pieces that we've looked at, kind of at an initial level, looking at how what we're considering today compares with prior work that's been done, and then thinking through what that means in terms of high-level roadway scale impacts. Does it fit with the street system that we've envisioned or not? And beyond that, what other specific impacts that we identify? So let's get on to the next slide, please. So the beginning point is just a high level. You've already seen these totals in Joe's presentations, but this adds up all the households and all the jobs across those three alternatives. And then the bottom row there is the estimated trip generation. Now these are just vehicle trips. We're not accounting for any other trips in this particular math. So when I look at this, what I see is that the trip generation, the vehicle trip generation, is actually pretty similar across the board and almost identical for alternatives 2 and 3. Now again, this is a kind of a macro level total. So it's if you add up all the trips in the entire planning area, that's the total you would get. Certainly there would be differences because we're looking at different densities and use types throughout the plan, but overall it gives you a sense that the magnitude of travel is similar across the alternatives. Next slide. Purpose of this slide is just to kind of look back at the study that Washington County, Jessica in particular, got involved with to look at what happens when urban reserve do come into the county. What kinds of needs might they be? Is there someone talking? Oh, echo. So the URT study, the Urban Reserve Transportation Study, looked at what happens if a bunch of pending UGB areas did in fact come into the county. What might that look like? And so the last column there shows you the assumptions that were applied for that study. Quite a bit higher total in terms of housing, but a lot less jobs. And ironically, when you look at the trips generated by that, it's in the range. It's less than alts 2 and 3, but it's more than alt 1. So I guess from a macro level planner point of view, I'm saying, well, these are all very similar kinds of alternatives in terms of vehicle trip intensity. So next slide. This is just a reminder of some of the slides you've seen earlier in the presentation. I've got the trail system very well developed, takes good advantage of the terrain there and gives people lots of options away from the arterials. We did talk a little bit about in the earlier presentation, the north-south connector there on the far left side. This group knows this, but this is the slide that might be more useful tonight, is just understanding that as this area develops, that all the roads that are out there are going to be upgraded in one sense or another to get up to an urban class standard. So shouldn't say all the roads, but most of the roads. So some of them have been improved near the high school and that kind of thing, but you get the idea. There'll be many changes in terms of the roads that are out there today. The major roads on this system are listed there: Shoal, Sherwood, Elbert, Edie, and Kruger, those will likely be all 3-lane roads, and which means 1 lane in each direction and a center turn lane. The rest will be 2-lane roads. We did highlight the overcrossing at pedestrian only overcrossing at Sunset and 99W. That's city's moving ahead with that. There's been an initial conversation about another overcrossing at 99 down near Brookman Chapman. That would not be pedestrian only. That would be a full vehicle. I would point out that that particular overcrossing, it's not to strike a difference between that and an interchange. It doesn't have direct access to the highway. So it's meant to be a connector between the west side and the east side of the highway and not serve as a direct access to the highway. So that's an important piece. Next slide. So in terms of what this all means in terms of traffic impacts, as you might imagine, because the trip intensities are similar, the impacts that we saw across the board were similar. We believe that the planned 3-lane collector and arterial facilities will work just fine with any of these concepts. We did identify a handful of locations where there will be upgrades required as development occurs, and they're listed there under the key intersections on Elward. So Elward Edie, it's currently configured as a 2-part roundabout. So that would either move forward as a roundabout or have some other kind of configuration, but it's still, each of those intersections would need to be upgraded compared to what's today. Same goes for Shoal Sherwood. Let's see, the last comment on that is that there's intersections further south down by closer to the high school, Handley and Haiti. Locations would likely be upgraded as development occurs, but that frankly would be handled through the development review process. You know, the city has traffic impact analysis guidelines, and you'd pick up those kinds of improvements at that level. So I think overall what this tells me is that the plan as envisioned will work well, given the intensity and the configuration of the road and trail system. Next slide. The last item was the north-south connector, which is a new piece. That wasn't something that we looked at back when we did the ERT study. So that's a direct connection from Edie to south to Chapman Road, gives a direct parallel to Elward. I've seen these kinds of concepts when you're on the edge of the urban development. What we find is they aren't all that very attractive for the development to use. So the forecast that we came up with was somewhere in the 2,000 to 4,000 vehicles a day. And if that's being considered an arterial, that's a very low volume for an arterial. That's more of a collector level volume. And what we've seen is that in our analysis so far is that's mostly local users that are taking advantage of that connection. That it doesn't look to be a very convenient alternative to Elward for trips that are more regional, longer in nature. So that's the sense we got through that. We also took a little bit of look at trucks as a part of our analysis and found similarly that regional trucks wouldn't be all that attracted over to that other route. But again, that was just a very sketch level look. We could look more into that if you all folks have concerns that we should discuss more importantly. So let me pause there. I think that's my last slide, Joe. So let me see if there's any questions.
Okay. We'll open it up to the group, but maybe while people are thinking, Carl, let me just pose one that might help a little bit on this. What you did was you ran a model. So
right.
you ran the model and looked at how the trip distribution worked within the assumptions and the limits of modeling.
Right.
And so that is what is underlying your conclusion on this slide and the other ones as well is a high level modeling exercise, right?
Correct. Yeah, we applied the county's west side model in doing these forecasts, which is the similar tool that we used for the ERT study and other, concept planning studies up the road, River Terrace, Kingston Terrace, Cooper Mountain. They're all using the same kind of tools to do these forecasts.
Okay. Jessica, let's go to you.
Thank you, Joe. Just had a few comments and questions. First, The conceptual streets aren't really labeled as to what their proposed functional classification would be, but I just wanted to note that the county standards are that streets connecting to an arterial should be a collector level. So the one in the north, Edie is, and then Conzelman is not, but if that will be extended, like it looks like it will, Hanley, Haiti, I think that's how you say that. So that's our standard. Any other connections require a design exception by the county engineer. And of course, the purpose of that is to maintain mobility and capacity of the county arterial network. And related to that, I would say that we anticipate Elwert remaining the primary arterial through the area. It's in our TSP as a 3-lane collector, as Carl was saying. We anticipate that to be 2 travel lanes, a center turn lane as needed, and of course work with the city on any design considerations for bike ped facilities, multi-use paths, or anything of that nature. I do have a question for the project team on the potential realignment of Elwert. I am still concerned that the feasibility of it with DSL and just the construction process and the wetlands and the mitigation, and with when we already have a route through there that could be improved. And I wanted to know if there has been any conversations about the details of that. I just worry about a plan getting adopted showing that if it's not feasible, and the cost and et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly, wanted to note, and I know I've said this before, that any roundabouts on arterials, and they're fine, we do roundabouts more and more, but they do need to be designed to accommodate truck traffic.
Erica, can you pick up on the question of conversations with the state and federal permitting?
I can.
Folks.
So I did reach out to DSL and I spoke to DSL staff about this project and about rerouting Elwert Road. And basically at this point in time, they said that they would want to see a detailed alternatives analysis, between the two. So between the reroute and keeping Elwert as it is.
Jessica, I'll add a little bit to that. The primary initiation of the idea actually came from the preliminary concept plan that was done. There's a write-up of it in the preliminary concept plan. And among other things that it summarizes, it basically describes how Elwert obviously needs to be improved, whether it's in its existing corridor or a new one. So you have to do something. Where it's located now is low-lying, floodplain type of area, a lot of environmental conditions around the intersection of Elwert and Edie. And it was the judgment of that alternatives analysis that the impact would actually be less to realignment than to rebuild it in place. Now, that kind of analysis needs to be taken to a much more thorough level for DSL purposes. But at a very first concept level, that was the analysis, and including a look at sort of the constructability issues, because if you were to build it in place where Elwert is today and try to do the traditional kind of shoe fly around it while you build the corridor road, you run into a lot of environmental impacts to do that. It's just simply very constrained. And it was not clear how travel could occur while you were building it there, as opposed to the alternative of the realignment. So I'm probably over summarizing quite a bit, but that was the logic line in the initial work and has been sort of part of the discussion at CAC level. Has some information for you. John, let's go to you.
Yeah, thank you. John Russell, representing ODOT, filling in for Glenn Bolin. He had to take another meeting. Just want to echo some of the comments that Jessica made in discussing this with Glenn prior to the meeting. One of our primary concerns, just thinking in terms of kind of overall traffic distribution, regardless of which alternative moves forward, related to basically the Elwert realignment. And as I'm looking at it, there's currently you've got Edie and you've got Elwert crossing Chicken Creek west of Roy Rogers Road. And this plan is showing the newly aligned Elwert, basically similar location to the current crossing that Edie's got, but with the removal of the existing Elwert crossing. And I'm looking at the trails concept, which does include, some non-motorized connections. Looks like there's one that's not quite halfway in between. But basically, as you're developing both sides of the creek, while also reducing the number of effective crossing points, that could effectively lead to, this is a city or county issue regards to the traffic kind of consolidating on that single bridge. But from an ODOT perspective, I think one of our concerns is more how that would affect how the traffic moves through to and from, Roy Rogers, Shoals, Sherwood, and getting to and from 99W. And essentially, as you're making, in this case, Elwert is less of a direct route. More folks might, for example, take Shoals, Sherwood all the way to Roy Rogers, all the way out to 99W. And basically just concerns that I think are worth studying in terms of how reducing the number of crossings is going to kind of flesh out amongst all of the traffic kind of routing decisions. If it were me, I'd like to see an addition of crossings, having a more robust and complete, kind of grid network rather than reducing it. That being said, I do like the additional trails and connections where there aren't any. My concern is just kind of, it looks like we're kind of getting into potential bottlenecks. And I understand there are probably some environmental concerns, but you've got a fairly nice grid there now, and this is potentially degrading that in terms of, overall network effects.
Carl, anything to add on the network?
So yeah, just to make sure I understand John's concern. So it's the realignment of Elwert to the other side of the creek as a part of the scheme. So that's it, right, John? Moving it a few hundred feet to the west, right?
Yeah, I don't have a problem. I think what's been presented about creating the new connection, construction wise, that sounds like a good idea. I guess my concern is that it appears that there's no longer going to be a connection where Elwert currently crosses. And so if you're looking at, there's currently two crossings within the area, one on Edie and one on Elwert. And the Elwert connection is essentially getting moved to the vicinity of the Edie crossing, but the former Elwert crossing is not getting replaced. And so you're reducing the number of crossings and funneling what will be an increased amount of traffic onto fewer roads.
So the existing Elwert crossing north of Edie, that crossing? Which crossing are you talking about? The southern one?
Yeah, so that one is going away, correct? Elwert, the north-south alignment across the creek?
Not necessarily. It could be retained as a local connection.
Well,
Yeah.
what about the Edie connection directly going east-west?
The Edie we've shown there as actually the line is still there, but I think we need to revisit that, frankly, Jessica, because it's underneath the some of the green line work. But we've shown a road coming from Edie down to the southern roundabout. Kate, if you could use the cursor. So Edie would be routed down to that roundabout, and then you have Elwert as the crossing, and then access to the west or to the north from there. So we actually may have just inadvertently left a line in there where we didn't mean to, for the current crossing of Edie Road where it goes across Chicken Creek today.
Joe, I think we kept those lines in because the CAC was really concerned about presenting confusing transportation maps where, you know, existing roads aren't there. So I think it does create other confusion because it's unclear whether those will continue to be part of the streets network.
Yeah. So we'll revisit how that would look in future condition. But the heart of the concept here is to try and manage traffic in this Elwood corridor, and the realignment is part of the strategy. Okay. Anything else on transportation before we move to, I think, what's the last piece, which is going to take us a little bit to do. Okay, so let's go to the Mentimeter exercise. You guys are our dry run on this. Kate, you want to walk us through the instructions?
Sure. So if you all have a smartphone with you or some kind of device where you can log on, you visit a web page. I mean, it could just be on your computer browser. But if you could go to menti.com and then enter this code. You don't need to include the space, but it's 12550804. And let me see, I'm going to pause my share so you'll still see my screen, and meanwhile I'm going to navigate over to my browser. Okay. So, and we'll still have the code. The code will be visible up on the actual Menti website. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that window and share a new window. Okay. So is everybody seeing the Menti website? Okay. So this is just our test question to make sure everyone's kind of logged in and has the code. And we also, I'm just really curious to hear what your top choice of dessert is. And let's see, I think I'm not sure, I don't get information on how many people have voted, but
it shows on our screen down the bottom right. I see 8.
Oh, it does. Yes, you're right. It's kind of hidden.
Let's make sure everybody's connected and is doing this. How many total TAC members do we have right now, Erica?
That is a good question. Let me count really quick.
And our guest on the phone should not have connected.
Seven.
7? Oh, okay. Well, we've got 8.
Sure.
8 voters. Did you count Michael? Michael's with us now.
Nope. So 8. I think we're good.
Okay, everybody logged on then. Okay. Great. So we have a tie between pie and ice cream. Okay.
Carrot cake, anyone? Joe and I were on the same page about carrot cake.
Yeah.
All
okay,
right.
So now we're going to take you through the alternatives by district. And so do your best job at trying to sort of put all of this information together about land use, about transportation connections, and so on. Here's a little recap of the North District again. They all have a fairly substantial component of the mixed employment, the purple. And the differences are really in how much land use, non-employment, land use is in the central part, just north of Chicken Creek. So alternative 1 is on the left, 2 in the middle, and 3, if you like the community park in that location, and 3, that's a factor. So as you look at these and you see the themes, be picking what you would rank as your first choice. Okay, let's go to the vote. It'll take a few minutes for folks to get in here. Looks like we have 2 more people. Oh, we got everybody. Okay, preference for alternative 2. If you could back up a map, or back up to the map. Sorry, I don't know if it allows you to do that.
I
Does
think I
it?
can do that. Yeah.
All right, just a couple of feedback points from members. Why did you prefer 2?
Going back to my comments, concerns about the lack of crossings of Chicken Creek, that alternative 2 is kind of the least segregated along that and would probably have the most opportunity for shorter trips that wouldn't necessarily spill out onto the rest of the network.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, keep going. Let's go to the next one. So this is at the far west end of the spectrum. Just to dial you in on the maps, Edie Road is the east-west road that goes across the kind of the top third. Eastview is the boundary of the urban reserve, and the study area on the left. Chicken Creek is obvious. It's the green area. So this is really kind of 3 different versions of lower density choices in this area. A topographic note, you go from the Chicken Creek floodplain up to higher elevations to the left and to the top of the maps in this area. Question from you, Jessica?
Yeah, just a quick question. Can you please remind us what does medium density mean?
Kate, you want to, I believe this is our 5 to 8 units an acre category.
That
I'm gonna have
sounds
to.
right. Yeah, the proposed density ranges are based on Sherwood's current zoning districts, existing zoning districts. Erica, you're nodding your head.
Yes, so the medium density is 5.6 to 8 dwelling units per acre.
What does that translate to lot size?
I think that's 5,000 square feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
5 to 6.
Mhm.
And then, of course, in the middle housing world, think of it as a single dwelling type zone that also allows middle housing. Okay. All right, let's go to the voting exercise. Which of those do you prefer? Looks like we got most of you. Okay. We might have a 7-person vote on this particular. Oh, there's the last one. Okay. All right. So why? Any thoughts on the why behind your vote for alternative 2? Did adding in a little bit more density than the lowest category look like an appropriate direction? Was that the thought?
Yeah,
Mike?
to me, it just seemed like it was a better use of land, a better split of land uses, you know?
Mhm.
When I looked at it, it just seemed better all around.
Okay.
I mean, for me, it was the park, although if I were able to pick and choose having alternative 3, but with the larger park, would have been my choice. But the larger park over by the kind of ravine area, I think, was a main selling point for me.
Okay.
I like that too.
that's been a popular thing on all the maps at every step of the process. Okay, any other comments or thoughts on Far West? This certainly isn't binding. This is a process of just trying to
I don't think it would
learn
hurt to add
preferences.
some of that medium high density as well. It seems like if you're only doing how many units per acre there, it's like 6 or something, Erica, right? Is it 5 or 6?
So the MHDN, the medium high density, at the high end is 11 units an acre.
Okay.
So that's your small lot. If you're doing individual lots, that's like 3,500 square feet.
Right. Yeah. You also have a lot of infrastructure to pay for too. So
yeah,
start adding it all up. You might want to add different categories there. So
a relatively small spatial area of it, of course.
Yeah, and the elevation in this area is steeper than other areas of the plant.
That was my question. Is there a difference between the shades here on elevation? Because we don't want to, I mean, just generally speaking, the higher the elevation and away from basic infrastructure services, it would make sense to increase density in those areas.
Yeah, the higher elevations form, I'll call it kind of an arc from the west edge. So what's labeled in alternative 2 is the LDN area, the East View Road area. That's the highest point in this portion of the study area. It's actually part of a larger ridge line that runs quite a ways south. So that's the view homes that exist there today in that particular area. And then extending north and then a little bit east of there are also higher elevations. And so that what I'm doing my verbal cartography here, that what they do is they kind of surround a lower bowl area. So about a half an inch to the right of Park in the down in there. When you're down in there, you're down in the lower areas of this. So you can kind of see it goes from low to high from the creek up.
Okay. Yeah, I would suggest as one of the maybe the alternatives is to move the middle housing or the higher density houses beneath a bowl in any scenario. But sounds like option 2 would negate a lot of that, or 1 would. So.
Okay, let's move on to the next area. A little more going on in the West District. A point of comment before we talk about land use, start studying the maps, but if you're just trying to answer the question, what lands are closest to existing water and sewer infrastructure, this is it. It doesn't mean that investments by the city or proactive extensions to the north or to the southwest would change that situation. But if you're looking for what's the most easily served, it is in this particular district of Sherwood West. And so alternative 1 has mostly medium density neighborhoods. It kind of mirrors what is on the east side of Elwert, but introduces some multifamily, some medium high, along Haiti Road, uses the transitional kind of slopes for medium density west of the high school. And then again, we've stayed with the lower density as the hilltop kind of situation. That's alternative 1. Alternative 2, you can see it starts to get a little bit more mixed. The lower areas getting some more density and also some other uses. There's 2 distinct cottage configurations in alternative 2. One, yep, where the 2 cursor spots are. And then alternative 3 has multifamily in 2 distinct areas of the map, and you can see the rest of them mixed use and the various designations. So think through which one of these kind of matches your preference, your advice. And let's go to the voting. Okay, strong preference for 3. Comments, reasons? Jessica?
I voted for 3 because I think having more services near the school would be important to reduce trips trying to go into Sherwood proper for lunch and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of students and staff, et cetera, in the area, and especially if there's going to be a commercial area over there, the hospitality area seems like the best mix to me.
Okay. Any others?
I mean, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I mean, one of the nicest things I liked about the former location of Sherwood High School is just, you know, the proximity to downtown, and those sorts of things. And if it's just surrounded by, you know, multifamily is good, but having, you know, the employment and the mixed use, I think, like Jessica mentioned, is just internalizing those trips as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
One more comment, Joe. The households with children continues to change demographically in our nation. And so having multiple opportunities for different types of housing near the high school allows for the changing shape of families. So I think that will lead to more affordable housing options there within proximity to the school.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to add that I voted for 3 too, but it'd be nice to have a little more even the medium density in part of the lower density area there, like just to the west of the mix. Yeah, that exactly. Yeah. Whoever did that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking similarly, my second choice was, I mean, I liked the medium high density in number 1, that there was less of the low density there, but alternative 2 with the cottage clusters, be very easy to have the cottage clusters in alternative 3 as well. And if that were a 4th alternative, I would vote for alternative 3 with the cottage clusters, like the other person was mentioning, just in terms of having as many options close to the high school. I think is going to set the area up for success.
Okay. Great. Okay. Let's go to our last one. So Southwest kind of had the most diversity of land use choices. I think one thing to kind of train your eyes on is the Kruger Road corridor. The land just south of Kruger, south of the high school, is pretty flat, pretty developable. It gets steep as you go up the hill, left half of the map, but that's why there was sort of optimism about use of that area, a variety of uses. So you can see the choices. And I guess the hospitality is a little bit also a difference maker between the 3 approaches. And then the amount of multifamily and medium density kind of more in the middle part of this area is also a distinguishing factor. So let me give you another minute or 2 to make your choice.
Do you want to keep going, Joe? Should we go to the poll?
Yeah, let's go to the poll. Yeah, hit those buttons. We are not accepting mail-in ballots. We won't be counting for the next week. Okay. Unanimous for alternative one. If you can back up, let's take a look at that map. What was attractive about alternative one?
I could start. You've got your commercial up on the highway and your hospitality is off the highway for one, which is better. And if you're staying in a hotel or something, you don't want to be stuck right on the highway. The commercial will pull it in. You have a good mix of uses. One thing I didn't like about alternative one was the loss of the park. I like the idea that there's a park there, but also the fact that there's a better mix of land uses, and the situating of those land uses seems better fit.
Okay, somebody else?
I mean, I almost voted differently. Didn't want to just vote for one because everyone else did. I was leaning towards 3, but the one thing that I did not like with 3 is the hospitality being in that northeast corner. Just doesn't make sense to me having that across from the high school necessarily. But I did like for concept 3, I did like more of the employment, I think, of the options. I believe it was one of the higher employment options for that area, but ultimately went with 1 because it does have the better mix, and it does have the smaller parks, although I did miss the larger park as well.
Okay. Okay, good feedback. Thank you. Let's go.
We have 2 more questions, Joe, about Elwert and the north-south connector.
Right. So we just want to sort of try and bring together the various factors that have been thought about. And of course, there are questions and guidance for more things to study to date. But Kate, phrase the question. I don't want to try and remember exactly how we had it here.
It's pretty straightforward.
Okay. So we're just trying to get an input, and at the CAC level, a little bit of a verification. But at this group, do you support the Elwert realignment based on what you've heard so far? And the choices are yes or prefer to keep. And if you can't see the chat, there should be a support with caveats choice. We'll note the caveats. So if you want to vote, you could pick the yes.
I think we maybe could have rephrased this question, Joe, to say something like, do you think this should be kept as part of the concept plan, but note that it needs to be studied further, which is kind of more how we asked the north-south connector question.
Okay.
It feels hard, like maybe not enough information to be able to tell the feasibility of it.
I think my problem with it is I feel like we're eliminating capacity and forcing that traffic on somewhere else. So that's my biggest concern. And I mean, like John mentioned earlier, you have a really nice grid right now and multiple ways across that creek. You take those away, you're just going to bottleneck everything. And I just see it as creating more problems than it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much voting exactly the same as what Michael said. I have no issues with the let's call it the new alignment, but if you're talking the realignment, assuming that you remove the straight north-south kind of grid connection, like I said, I'm voting for more connections across the creek rather than fewer.
So you would want the new and the old retained?
I'm not necessarily, I don't want to be that prescriptive. I think there are other options where you could have different connections that didn't necessarily follow the grid. But like I said, the new proposed alignment is more or less in the location of where 80 crosses the creek currently, but would remove where Elwert currently crosses. And if you came up with a plan that had 2 different alignments that had 2 at least 2 or more connections across the creek, I think it'd be more amenable. It's just the going from 2 to 1, like Michael mentioned, it's just the bottleneck that I think we're concerned about.
Okay. Well, aren't we going from 1 to 1? We're trying to locate where the arterial would be. Starting condition is L-word is the alternative arterial and it's straight. The alternative, the realignment is to change the arterial to follow the realignment.
I think he's referring to the 2 different crossings at Chicken Creek. So right now there's the ED crossing and there's the L-word crossing.
Right.
And if these were both removed, then it would just be the sort of combined crossing.
Okay. Okay.
Not to mention you're removing the efficiency of a direct route.
Right. Okay. All right. Good
I
feedback.
think Kate either previously said that they kept the lines on there to not confuse people, but I think it's more confusing people.
Yeah, I think it is too. Because the idea here would be, let me just say this out loud, is that the line we inadvertently left on or mistakenly left on, which is just use the cursor if you could, is the section of ED between L-word and the realignment. That should not be there. Okay. And if you're traveling locally, like coming from Eastview, you would come down to the roundabout, take a right, and go down to the other roundabout and take a left and head into town on ED Road. The northern extension of L-word from its current intersection at ED, that's a question mark as to whether that would be left. We really haven't kind of looked. I don't think it would be needed, frankly, in the whole network. So you would probably pull that too, but I don't know, we got a little more work to do on that. Apologies for the.
Yeah, I think I agree that it's probably one of the more confusing, even if just as far as the diagram, the map, if there were, say, like a red hatching over the, roadway to be removed. And I think you could make a good argument of, restoring the natural area, all those sorts of things, having a better crossing that doesn't have as much impact on the creek, fish passage and all that. But if it was just a matter of realignment and you still had the old alignments that could, be a local road or something. But as it stands, what you're saying is with the new alignment, if you're going just east or west on ED, you've created quite a bit of out of direction travel for that. And the same sort of thing if you're going on an L-word, which I think I heard comments alluding to that it might actually be a bit of a feature to add a little bit of deviation in L-word to have less cut through traffic. But I'm just thinking for the amount of traffic that this neighborhood itself will generate, folks that are trying to get between the employment in the north and the housing in the south, having the one connection, I think that is a pretty big deal breaker. Whereas if there were another, let's call it, one of the more diagonal kind of potential alignments connecting, let's say on kind of the north side to the east, for example, even if it were lower classification, just having a more fully fleshed out network, just so you're not pointing all the traffic at a single point like a fire hose, have a few more garden hoses would help alleviate that pressure.
Michael, something to add?
Yeah, like what John's saying, I think you're increasing out of direction travel, more vehicle miles traveled, and reducing the efficiency of the network by forcing folks to go around like this.
Right.
And if you had a series of different crossings at different points, then maybe, but then you're talking about new crossings across an area and more wetland impacts than what you currently have. So I don't see that as a win necessarily,
Yeah. Okay, I think we got a little more work to do this. I appreciate the feedback and kind of the thinking on the spot. My summary would be that we should not show the line between Elwert, existing Elwert and the realignment. That is not part of the proposal. And we have to study it more, but I think you have to pretty much leave existing Elwert in place as a local road so that there wouldn't be as extreme out of direction travel for Elwert to Edie or Edie to Elwert local trips. Okay, let's go to the hard one. One more. And I'm going to watch the time here so we do wrap up by 4. So you heard Carl's analysis about kind of the role of this north-south connector in moving traffic throughout a network. You saw in the packet materials some of the information from Bob Galati. You heard the critique of it from public comment that we heard today. So put all that together and answer this question for us. What should be the next steps for the conceptual north-south connector? Keep it in the plan and study it some more, or remove it from the plan?
As a point of clarification, are we talking about the one we were just talking about?
Oh, sorry. Let's go back. Can you go back at this point? No, we're talking about the one that is on the west perimeter, Mike. So it would go from Chapman to Edie. It's the new bridge over Chicken Creek.
I got you.
There's been a fairly high level of concern from the Eastview neighbors related to this. Okay. Okay, let's start with the whys. Let's start with the remove from concept plan. Why did you vote that way?
I voted to remove it because I think it's out of direction and won't be used, like Carl alluded to in his overview. So I just don't think it functions as a collector very well. So not to say that there shouldn't be maybe a local road connection. However, with the topo, it just seems also extraordinarily expensive for what would be probably limited use. And it really then puts traffic right back on Elworth. So it doesn't really make any sense to me, I guess, from a planning perspective. I think we just need to understand that Elworth is the primary arterial through there and use it as such.
Okay, any others on the why remove it from the concept plan side?
I just put the remove it as well. Do a lot of what Jessica said regarding what Carl's comments about concern of how much is it going to be used, how much traffic is going to go down and around like that, the cost of it, the impacts to the rural reserve area, to the further to the west there. I just don't see, and then how are you going to pay for it? This extremely expensive road that probably, according to a lot of the plans, has lower density development along it too. How are you going to pay for this, this roadway?
Okay. The three of you who were in the keep column, what were your thoughts?
I guess I'll start just for the fact that if I were to write my own answer, I think I would say remove and study further. I agree with the concerns regarding the just it's too steep, too expensive. It's duplicative. It's going to send things right back to Elworth. And I agree with all those concerns. That being said, I think it's obvious I'm firmly in the camp of more crossings of the creek and distributing the traffic. I think has some merits, and so I think it should be studied. I would happily put a vote of remove the north-south connector from consideration and instead look at spending those funds. Like, there should be a crossing. Where is the best place to put it? If it's extending Eastview, maybe to go down and connect to Haiti instead, and avoid some of the kind of topography concerns, or it might be say, a different realignment of a different crossing somewhere else.
Okay. Any others?
Along John's thinking here, I was looking at, and we're talking about the conceptual north-south collector, right? Eastview Road from Eddy to Chapman. And I just think, the more opportunities and you have, the better off your transportation network's going to be. So right now it's conceptual. It doesn't hurt to study it, take a look at it. And to me, if this is on the far west side, and then you also have Elwert just outside the picture here, I imagine, then you have a nice grid to move traffic north, south, east, and west. So get people in, get them out, and then you don't have the bottlenecks.
Okay. All right. Thank you, TAC. Good feedback. Appreciate the participation. We'll see if we can have cake or ice cream next time if we meet in person, because you voted for those. Anything else, Erica, from you to wrap up?
So our next meeting with the CIC is this evening at 5:30. So we're going to get their feedback. And then from there, I think our next TAC CAC meeting will be early next year. Is that so?
Okay. Looks like that's it. Thanks, everybody. We're going to sign off. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.